You know, art takes many forms, yet it all starts with an idea or concept from inside the artist's mind. Welcome to Inside the Artist's Mind. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. On today's show, we find out about the architectural concepts behind unique buildings. But before that, we caught up with fashion designer Angela Johnson. We caught up with Angela in her colorful North Scottsdale studio. So Angela Johnson, welcome to Inside the Artist's Mind. Thanks so much for allowing us to come into your fashion studio today.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks. And you're a fashion designer. What got you started into fashion?
Well, I've always liked fashion from a young age. My grandmother loved clothing, and she had closets full of clothing that she kept around from the 40s. And I used to play in the closets and dress up, and that just got me interested from a young age.
So you've been into fashion from the very beginning. I mean, that's something you always knew you were going to get involved in?
You know, I'd always liked it, but I didn't know I was going to do it for a career because I didn't realize that you could make a career out of it when I was young. So I didn't pursue it until later in life.
Now, you have your own clothing line. What exactly does that mean?
Well, that just means that I design clothes under my own name, Angela Johnson, and then come up with ideas, produce them, sell them in stores nationwide and on my website.
Now, how do you create clothes? I mean, clothes have been around for like ever, and, right? I mean, and there's like, how many different ideas can there be?
I know. See, that's the thing about fashion is like you can only do so many things before you're repeating things. But that's pretty much what the industry is about. You know, everybody copies everybody, and it's a cycle. It's either, you know, one extreme or the other. It's about every decade, pretty much. So you'll see, you know, everything's tight for about a decade, and everything's loose for about a decade. Well, that's what's funny is it sort of comes from everywhere. The public, the people decide, and then there's actually people whose jobs are to predict fashion. They write these things called predictives, which are books that fashion designers look at, and they get ideas from these books. So they predict fashion, but at the same time, you know, they're kind of setting the trends because all the designers look at those books, and you know, we all kind of want to stay in competition with each other.
Well, let's talk about redesigning. I know you take like T-shirts and various things and design them into like ball gowns. What is that all? Explain that to us.
So I take that idea of recycling ideas, basically. I go to Goodwill and all those thrift shops, and I pretty much find funny T-shirts or T-shirts that have, you know, they're like vintage or they have something on there that's interesting, and I cut them and create ball gowns out of them. So
now,
big,
what
huge,
gave you
billowing
that
ball
idea?
gowns.
How did you?
I just like the idea of having the two different juxtaposition of it. Having the, you know, the T-shirts, the very casual, comfortable, grungy kind of idea mixed with something very elegant. And
now, do you mass produce that, or
well,
you just...
see, that's the thing is I have a couple different lines. One of them is mass produced, and that's just regular clothing that I make out of fabric. But then I have the custom pieces that are more individual, that I have to make, you know, each one separately. I can't mass produce them because they're made out of recycled clothing.
So you get up every day thinking about fashion and like going to try to find
I'm a
things?
huge geek.
Just constantly, right?
It's pretty much, that's what I think about all the time, and I even dream about it. I have a book next to my bed, and I get up in the middle of the night and I write down ideas.
Wow. So what are the steps in creating an item?
Basically, you make a pattern, and you can either make it by drafting it, and the other way to make it is by draping, by taking fabric and draping it on a dress form.
Oh, okay.
And then you take that and you actually sew it. If you drape it, then you take it and you turn it into a pattern, and then you cut it out of the fabric that you're using, and then you sew it.
And those steps take?
They could take a while, especially, you know, the pattern making. It's a very technical thing. You know, it took a lot of class to, you know, all the classes I took basically to learn how to do that. And I still don't feel like, I'm the best at it in any way.
Well, you've only been doing it for how long?
I graduated in 1995, so.
So 10, 12 years, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and it seems like I could learn forever. I could keep learning. There's so much to learn about pattern making. It really is a difficult thing.
Now, how is it though, seeing, I mean, you're doing your work at drafting it or draping it, as you said, and then seeing it actually on somebody?
That's the best part. That's the biggest reward. And especially if you don't know the person and they're just walking down the street or something, you're like, I made that.
Now, your fashion line, it doesn't follow the annual calendar,
No,
does it?
it doesn't.
Explain that.
Well, that's just because I'm really busy and I've taken on a little bit too many things. And I teach fashion too, so I got a lot of things going on.
Where do you teach fashion?
I teach at Mesa Community College.
Wow.
Yeah, so between all of that, I don't have as much time as I would like to dedicate to my own line.
I'm surprised you have time for this interview.
I know.
That is amazing.
It's a lot of work, but it's all stuff that I love to do anyways, and so I just, it's rewarding to me. But I can't keep up with the seasons because of that, so I actually do 2 seasons a year, and some years I do 1 for the whole year, but it just, I sell the stuff throughout the year.
Where do you see the fashion business going? Is it in Arizona? Is it on its way up?
Yeah, it definitely is. I've seen so many improvements in what comes out of the designers here, and just the number of them and the amount of boutiques that have opened up and that are carrying local designers too. And
I have seen more in downtown Phoenix, especially. I've seen more and more little shops opening up.
That's going crazy.
But who decides what is in fashion? And can there be more than one thing in fashion at the time?
Definitely. I mean, there's always a lot of different things, it's decided by the customer. Whatever sells then is repeated, basically, and copied. And, manufacturers will evolve a style if it sells. They'll keep it, but they'll change something about it a little bit so that people have to buy more,
And how far out do they, I mean, like sometimes you'll see something at a store and you're like, wow, that's cool. And then a month or two later, that's gone. It's not there, and then they're like, "Oh well,
It's a very quick turnover in fashion,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is you have to keep up with that. Designers think a year in advance, so
Whole
basically
year.
you come up with something a year in advance.
So right now, people are thinking a year from now, like what's going to be
Exactly,
in.
and that's the hard part. Is like, how do you know? What do you think? Like, how do you know what's going to be, what people are going to wear, and keep up with that and make sure you're on track? And that's the iffy part.
What if they guess wrong?
Well, then then you're only as good as your latest line, so you go downhill from there. Those predictives I was talking about in the beginning, it's basically what sets the trends, and all the designers, they want to be in competition with each other, so everybody subscribes to those predictives. I mean, established big design houses do. Small designers like me, we can't afford them. They're thousands of dollars an issue, basically. And so like $10,000 for a subscription to these things. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's because they set the tone for the rest of the world.
And these people, set in a little room somewhere?
Pretty much.
Where are they at? Where are they? Do we
There's
know?
different companies that have these.
I mean, are they in like Rome somewhere? Or?
It's a big conspiracy. No, there's different companies, and they actually hire people whose jobs are to travel, and they go around and they see what's on the streets, and they see what's in on the runways and stuff like that, and they compile these ideas into these books. And there's a few different companies that do it, so it's not like one little group that is the mastermind of fashion for everybody, but there's a few that really they are. And you'd think, okay, are they setting the trends or are they predicting them? And it's a little bit of both, because what they say goes. The designers all want to be up on what everybody else is doing, so they follow what's in the books, but at the same time they're setting the trends, because whatever they say goes.
So how do you personally come up with new, fresh ideas?
Basically, I see what's out there and I see, how can I improve it? How is it going to change? Things only stay in style for so long. So if something's been baggy for so long, then I know it's going to be tight pretty soon. So I'm going to change my style, So that's how I do it. And then I'm just inspired by things around me. I mean, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's friends. It could be anything. It really could be.
So you're
anything.
just kind of looking around.
Yeah.
And just observing. And
Yeah, I keep a design book where I just kind of write down ideas and collect pictures and images and leaves and whatever,
What would you like people to know about fashion design?
That it's not all the glamour that everybody thinks it is. Everybody sees the runway show and thinks, that's so exciting, that's what I want to do. But then, people try to get into the industry and they realize, it's a lot of hard work, and basically it's 5 minutes of glamour. It's that runway show that's it, and the rest of the time it's hard work, it's technical, it's boring, a lot of times it's long hours.
It sounds like television.
Yeah, I bet.
You mentioned there are lots of technical parts of it. Are there rules in fashion you cannot break? I mean, just don't do, or is it subjective?
Yeah, personally, I think it's subjective, but there are fashion rules that other people will tell you that you can't break. But to me, it's all about breaking those rules.
Like what's a rule that you're not supposed to break?
Oh gosh, like the don't wear white, in the winter and stuff like that. I think that's ridiculous. You can't wear brown and black together and all those old school rules.
So do you see a lot of those things changing now?
I do, actually. I think that a lot of that's changed just with how the culture's become more relaxed and everything. But at the same time, even the rules that you see, the casual style kind of rules, like when everybody's wearing low-rise jeans, I want to wear high-rise ones. I just think it's fun to break the rules. That's what fashion's all about.
So were you breaking rules as a young child?
Yeah, I was a pretty good kid, but as far as fashion came, I was always breaking the rules of fashion. But just breaking rules in general, I was really good. I really was. You can ask my mommy.
Well, what would you do? It seems like fashion's your life, and
Yeah.
it's your passion.
Yeah.
What would you do if you couldn't do fashion?
That's the scary thing. I have no idea. I would be lost. I don't know. When I was younger, the things that I wrote down that I wanted to do were, I wanted to be an oceanographer because I like the beach. I guess that's one thing. I don't think I could do anything else. I'm not good at anything else. This is the one thing that I'm good at, and so I don't know. I'd probably be a stay-home mom. I have 2 kids, and I really love being with them, and I miss not being able to, be with them as much as I can because I work so hard. So that's what I would do.
What sort of advice would you give to somebody who thinks they want to become a fashion designer?
Be prepared to work really hard, really long hours, and just, struggle basically, and be poor for a little while.
Would you say the Valley is now a good place to start?
It's a good place to start. I think it's a good place to start because there's not a lot of competition yet. You go to New York and LA and you're just one of many. But here, you can actually establish yourself.
Well, what is next for you?
I want to mass produce in bigger quantities, basically. So, I want to do less of the custom, less of the pieces that take me so long, and mass produce more, just because I'm going crazy. It's just a lot of work, a lot of...
I would think each separate piece would be an awful
Yeah, it's
lot.
hard to create everything yourself. And I love doing that, so I'll always do that. That'll be part of my line forever, but I would like to do more of the mass production and sell in more boutiques. So, if I had the time to go out and sell my line more, then I could get it out there more. So I think that's my next step, is trying to get there.
Well, we ask this question of every artist we interview. The name of the show, Inside the Artist's Mind.
Yep.
What is inside your mind?
I think there's too much inside my mind. Everything is inside my mind, between, what I teach and what I do every day, and my organization, and being a mom and being a wife and everything. I've got so much in there that I can't fit anything else. It's just too much information is what's inside my mind.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. We just enjoyed coming into your studio and seeing your work. It's phenomenal.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And hopefully down the road we'll catch up with you again and see what you're up to.
I would love it. Thank you.
Angela's quite the artist. I really should talk to her about designing some shirts for me. When we come back, we're going to meet an architect with a unique and passionate vision. But first, a quick thanks to our sponsors.
The magazine for your community. Community Brief Magazine is a proud sponsor of this episode of Inside the Artist's Mind. Today's show is also brought to you by Core Advertising. Let Core Advertising bring your vision to life.
Have you ever seen a beautiful building and wondered how it all came together? I know I have. Let's go meet an architect. Hey, Jerry, how's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, so this is the place, huh?
This is it? Oh.
We got a chance to speak with Jerry Little at his downtown Phoenix office. So Jerry Little, welcome to Inside the Artist's Mind, and thanks so much for allowing us into your workspace.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Now, you are an architect. What exactly is an architect, and how did you get into architecture?
An architect is traditionally a master builder. That's kind of
So the
the
word
definition.
means, that's what the word means? Yeah.
Exactly. An architect is somebody that designs, and used to be building,
Right.
but anymore they are typically just doing the drawings. and there's actually a contractor or a builder that actually builds the building.
Do you work in tandem with that person?
Sometimes there's a process called design build these days. So it's more in relationship to each other, or the architect is the contractor, or the contractor hires the architect.
So what got you started into architecture?
I used to love to draw houses.
Just for fun, you mean?
Yeah. As a kid, when I was 10 or 12, something like that. I used to draw houses and just sketch a little bit. And I love to build things. I love to work with my hands and really build things.
Now, the name of your business, SEAD.
Yes.
What is that all about?
It's an acronym for the Studio for the Exploration of Architecture in the Desert. So what that means, a studio is an open environment such as this, where we have, offices where people can sit, but it's an open space where communication and dialogue can be carried on. Exploration, so we try things, we explore. It doesn't always work. Sometimes we do things and we're like, oh man, that's bad. Start over, do it again.
So let's talk about that word architect. Exactly. I mean, we hear that word thrown around all over. The architect of the war. They'll call a football coach like the great architect. They won the Super Bowl. How do you feel about that word being used?
Well, I guess I'm a little possessive of it.
Yeah.
It is widely used, as the master planner, master builder, or something. But there's a lot of work that goes into becoming an architect.
How much work did it take
Well,
for you? You are a professional
yes,
architect.
A registered professional architect. It takes a 5-year accredited degree.
5 years.
Yeah, or you can take a 4-year degree with a 2 years master's that's accredited.
Wow.
There's also a 3-year apprenticeship that you have to take. And
On top of the
Yes.
degree, you've got to go 3 years after that.
That's correct, working underneath a licensed architect. And you have to put in so many hours in certain areas and complete an IDP, intern development program. And then there's also, after that, there's testing, which is about 10 tests,
my God.
approximately 48 hours
So
of testing.
you really had to want to become an architect. Right?
Absolutely.
Why are you an architect?
Well, I guess there's some notoriety to that, the idea of being an architect, and to be kind of in charge and to lead the team. An architect is a team leader. There are many, many people involved in the building of a building, and the architect is kind of the go-to person that kind of leads the team.
Well, let's talk about that. How do you, as an architect, you're going to design a building, right?
Correct.
There's nothing there,
Exactly.
and then you're going to make something happen.
Yes. And
Take me through those steps.
Well, and that's kind of the scariest part is starting with the blank piece of paper.
Right.
So you really look for guidelines on how to design and what to design. A lot of that comes from the owner or the client.
Right.
They have some specific requirements as far as their spaces, the number of rooms, whether it's a residential or commercial building. There's also site. The site is a huge part of it. One of the most important things.
You mean the actual space that you're going to
the
design?
physical surroundings,
Yeah.
the environment you're in, whether you're in the desert or the Northeast, huge difference with those.
So you have to factor all of that in
Absolutely.
before you even get your, what is it, you use a pencil, a pen? I don't know.
Yes, pencil and paper, trace sometimes, overlay, and you draw. A lot of things are done on the computer these days too. So you start with some sketches, some laying out, massaging the floor plan and how things go together, looking at the elevation, which is the 3D version.
And
of
you find
looking
that
at the
pretty
facade.
creative? I mean, that's a neat creative process, or?
Yes, absolutely. The schematic design is what it's called, technical terms, is kind of the big idea, and that's where you start, is you get the big idea. And that responds to the program, to the site, to the city that it's located, the codes. There are a huge number of codes and restrictions and requirements to get through.
Imagine. Now, we've had some of your work on our show today. How do you approach a business versus a house, and speak to that?
Well, a residential, actually, believe it or not, is one of the most difficult projects there are.
And why is that?
Well, because where else are you going to have a place where you bathe, where you eat, where you sleep, so close together? It's in a very common space. Multiple influences on a house. So, but there's also a lot of freedom.
You take all that into consideration
Absolutely.
when you're designing?
Yeah.
What are you thinking about when you design that?
It's very important to understand the client and the actual user of the project and what they do, how they'll move and live in that space.
And when you talk about designing, you said sometimes you trace and And I know we caught you doing some models, and then there's a computer. Are there steps? You do one then the other, or do some of it's all on computer, some of it's model?
Well, a lot of people do a lot of different ways of doing it. There's no set hard and fast rule, so you can do it any way that you feel comfortable with it.
Watching you do the model thing, that looked very tedious. I mean, you're sitting there doing a little this, a little that.
It is. It's extremely tedious. It takes a craftsmanship and a lot of
And
delicate
then when you're
fine
done
work.
with that, no one can live in it. It's too small.
Correct. It's designed for ants.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, then you take. How do you take that model, that design, and then make that a reality? I mean, you times everything by a certain.
Well,
I mean, how does that work?
typically there's drawings that supplement that. So in the early design phases, and the model is for the client or the user to actually be able to feel the space, because a 2D, a flat drawing, is kind of hard to experience. And when you see, well, that overhangs here, and this is open here, and that's how
And then
that
that's where
looks.
some dialogue
Yeah,
opens
exactly.
up and
People
say,
can
"Oh,
respond.
I want more of that or less of that."
Because you don't want somebody to respond and say, oh, this isn't what I imagined it to be, and I don't like this, when it's actually being built.
Now, how do you know when you have it? I mean, is it very subjective, or how do you know when it's like, hey, that's it?
There's a certain amount of subjectivity with any kind of creative field. So there's a certain aspect of that. And of course, I personally always want to cause some kind of communication or some kind of thought-provoking. Whether you love it or hate it, create some kind of response. Very important to get a response.
You mean your work, when people
Yes.
see your work, you want them to go, I love it, or what is
I
that?
hate it, or ooh, interesting, or wow. You know, whatever it might be. Evoke a response, because that's very important, that people just walk by buildings and are like blah. They just don't notice it.
So do you
And
look
it's
at buildings every day? I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. All kinds of buildings, everything, whether, and sometimes I don't notice many buildings, you know. You drive and you drive in an environment that's just blah.
like in Phoenix, what buildings excite you?
Well, the library, the Phoenix Library, the main
that is
library.
cool.
That is very good. The Science Center.
Yeah.
That's
different.
That's another building.
That's very different.
Yeah.
I've had some people, they go, it looks like it's not finished.
Well, there you go. They created some kind of a response. They noticed it.
Right.
And that's important with architecture, is noticing the buildings.
What do you think is a very important skill for an architect to have?
A vision. Vision, to be able to perceive space, to physically see a drawing and understand what that's going to feel like to be in that space.
What do you like to design? If you could design anything, you know, full time, I'm sure you do a lot of work because you got to pay bills.
Sure.
But if you could just design anything that you
Well,
would like to design.
yeah, one of the things I would like to design is a museum. I think there's a set, you know, initiation that it's about art, and it's about creativity, and about the public, and about experience space. And there's kind of a contrast there. There's being in the background for the art, but then there's also being in the foreground of this is design, this is creativity.
So you really feel the space when you're creating. right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's,
When you're drawing it, you're living it every day, and you know it before it's ever built. And that's a different experience. Like, you've lived in it for a year during this design process before the client's ever actually seeing it. And then they see it, and it's like, yeah, that's the way I saw it. in
so
my head.
how cool is it for you you have the idea, the concept, and then you're driving by? And you
Well,
see-
and that's very cool. Sometimes when you're working on a project, it can be very, I don't want to call it long, but you know, you can spend a good 2 years working on a residential project to actually getting it built. So there's a certain point at which you become maybe burned out on the project, and it's like, you know, you've been through all that. And then when other people see it, when the client sees it, when there's that response, then it's like, that's why I did it.
How do you get your ideas and your concepts? Where are they coming from?
You're inspired by lots of things, whether it's pieces of art, sculpture, whether it's other buildings,
Are there certain
photographs.
architects that you really just love their work and you try to maybe incorporate some of that in? Or?
Well, I don't want to say that I incorporate it in, but there's certain philosophies that I definitely identify with and believe in. Anton Predock is one of those, the Science Center.
Arizona Science Center,
Yeah. Will Bruder here locally
Right.
in Arizona.
Didn't he do the
Phoenix Library.
Right, yeah,
Yep.
wow.
Eddie Jones, Jones Studio. We have some great architects here in the Valley.
I'm getting the feeling you really like to design, you like to build.
I do.
That's what you like to do.
Very much
right?
so, yes,
So what
absolutely.
if you couldn't do that?
If I couldn't do
Yeah,
that?
you couldn't do that.
Well,
what would you do?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe I'd fish.
Fish?
I don't know.
How do you balance art with use?
If a project does not function,
Right.
well, it's a bad project. Okay.
But
Point blank.
Function would be subjective to some degree.
Absolutely. So is art. So it has to function.
Yeah.
And you know whether a building functions or not. Right. If your bathroom's in your kitchen, or your kitchen is outside, or the refrigerator is a mile away from the stove. Right. You see those things that are inherent things that are in there.
What do you think makes a good architect?
What makes it? Determination,
Yeah?
commitment. I would say more than anything, attitude. It's about the attitude.
What advice would you give for someone who's thinking they might want to become an architect, or maybe they're coming through the process?
One of the big things is really do some research. Find out about architects.
Maybe hang around with you for a day. Huh?
Well, yeah, absolutely. They could certainly do that. But to find people that are doing good design or doing projects, and then just respond to them. Whether you like them or you don't like them, why do you like them? Why do you not like them?
So is it pretty cool being an architect?
It is. I think so. Absolutely.
You have done a local business. Are you thinking
Absolutely.
about maybe doing more
There's
businesses?
a commercial projects that we've done that you saw. We actually won some awards for, so it was
We're
very good.
speaking of Diamondback
Diamondback Plumbing.
Plumbing. Yeah, that was pretty unique design, I would say.
And that was our first project as a design build for Seed. That was our first project to design it and then to actually build it. So.
Well, the name of our show is Inside the Artist's Mind. So we're going to ask you what's inside your mind.
What's inside my mind?
Yeah.
Well, creativity, determination. Those are the things that say who I am. A willingness not to quit.
Well, Jerry Little, thanks so much for taking the time out today to be on the show. It was a pleasure to speak to you. Hopefully we'll see you down the road and see some more of your buildings.
Absolutely. Come back
popping up.
anytime.
Okay.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
This program was made possible by Community Brief Magazine, supporting the arts in our community, and by Core Advertising, bringing your vision to life.
I learned a lot today about fashion design and architecture. If you have any comments about the show, we would love to hear from you. And please direct them to our website at InsideTheArtist'sMind.com. Until next time.
If you'd like to see the uncut interviews of today's guests, or view the exclusive behind-the-scenes photos, then take a look at the DVDs available on our website.